Letter 2. April 28th. Shoo. It's now 1 o'clock in the morning of April 28, 1995. 2 hours ago, I buried Bunny. I buried Bunny in that little triangular park near Rue de Montcenis, just like you asked. I didn't feel depressed, I felt satisfied. Bunny's body had lain there in my room for 2 whole days. It was the first time I'd ever experienced the death of a loved one, of a life connected to mine, extinguished just like that, gone from existence. But the loneliness following Bunny's death caught me off guard, knocked me flat, deprived me of any fleeting sense of recovery. I was like a tripod, newly balanced. Then a leg suddenly gets sawed off. The death-filled afternoon air thickened with misery, and I couldn't eat or drink. Maybe you wonder why I torture myself like this, why I don't have even the slightest immunity to it. I don't know. I'm too receptive by nature, what Buddhists might call a kind of openness. It's my disease and it's my gift. It's my treasure and it's my fatal flaw. This morning I was anxious about burying Bunny. I had promised you an earth burial rather than a water burial for Bunny, so that you could visit the grave. But my friends all said I'd never find a good spot, and the pet cemetery was too expensive. Camira even went so far as to suggest throwing the body in the garbage. The body had been sitting there for 2 days already. If I had put off the burial any longer, it would have started to decay, and I would have failed to fulfill your wishes. This afternoon, I finally resolved to just pull myself together and lay Bunny peacefully to rest. Then you wouldn't have to worry about either of us. Daddy would take care of Bunny. I woke up to send my first letter to you, and then on the way home bought 10 champagne roses. I gave 3 of them to Ying, a squat blue candle sitting beside me now, and a shovel. I put yesterday's wet laundry in the dryer. I'm now wearing dry pants. Then I wrapped the gifts I'd bought for my family at Narita Airport. 3 ties for my father and brother-in-law, a pair of purses for my mother and sister. While I was at the post office to mail your letter, I impulsively bought you 30 sets of gorgeous stamps with 4 different designs. The books and CDs you sent me were an unexpected delight. I tried to call Shui Yao on my way home to let her know I was safe and well, but couldn't get through. Then I left a message on Wang Wang's answering machine to tell him my impressions of Chungking Express and Vive l'Amour. I returned home around dusk and made scrambled eggs with beef and onion and macaroni and some rice. After watching the news on TV, I went back to my room and stuck the stamps on envelopes already addressed to you while listening to the arias you had sent me. I felt curiously blessed, and I called Qingjin to arrange a time to talk with Xingping about learning to play the violin. White Whale called before dinner, too, to ask where I ended up burying Bunny, so I took that opportunity to press her about my taking tap dance lessons with her and told her a bit about the progress of my thesis. At the stroke of 11, I picked up the box with Bunny in it, put on my backpack full of tools, and stole out the door. All the gates to the park were locked shut, so that nobody would see me. I chose a remote corner, climbed over the wall, made my way into the wooded area, and keeping an eye out for the police, hid behind some of the thicker bushes and began to dig. The soil was soft and loose from the rain. After I dug the right size hole, I decided to take Bunny's body out of the box and place it directly in contact with the earth so it would decompose more quickly. I figured Bunny would enjoy becoming nourishment for those big plants. the picture of father and mother, the pair of farewell letters that they wrote, the plant that had preceded Bunny in death, the big hairbrush, and a ball of toilet paper that Bunny liked to play with. All were buried with the body. The body was still in good condition. It even seemed softer than 2 days ago. I covered it with a blue blanket, put some of Bunny's food pellets on top, then pushed all the dirt back into the hole and tramped it lightly with my foot. Suddenly I wanted to cry, thinking how I hadn't failed you, how I'd never again see that adorable little white body, how I'd finally experienced firsthand what it means to bury with your own hands, how Haruki Murakami had described burying 2 cats in 6 years. How many bunnies and how many secret loves would I have to bury in the beautiful, lonely city of Paris? Was I burying with my own hands was actually my love for you and Bunny. Has my love for both of you really ended up in the ground with nothing left but fantasy and echoes? Shu, you've misunderstood me. Perhaps I wasn't completely fit to be Bunny's daddy, but I had never been abusive. I cared for Bunny with my whole heart, and when Bunny died, I was a brave daddy. The 6th track on your CD, Sans Sense, softly awakes my heart, speaks to my feelings about Bunny's death. Shu, enter the park through the gate on the church side and look for the tall tree behind and to the right of the 2nd bench. The final resting place of our beloved Bunny and of our love is beneath a little mound of earth with a few scraggly weeds and a little champagne rose in the little triangular park near Rue de Montsigny. Letter 3, April 29th. Shu, someone called around 4 o'clock this afternoon. I was up late last night writing letters, so I was still lying in bed with the day yet to begin. For a moment I thought it could be you, calling to find out about Bunny's funeral, but the phone stopped ringing before I could get up. I immediately dropped the idea that it was you calling, since you've been trying so hard to abandon me. As I've become such a great scourge to you, it's unlikely you would squeeze out even a few reluctant tears of genuine concern. Shu, what you've done to me this month is wrong. I have to tell you this. From the point of view of interpersonal relationships, even if I am older and more mature than you, and even if there are things you're too young to understand, everyone is still responsible for their actions and the wrongs they commit against others. In the heart of hearts, no one can escape this responsibility. I can't, and so I'm trying to make up for the wrongs I've committed. I believe that 2 individuals always share a basic human bond. The depths of this bond depend on an unspoken agreement or oath between the 2. The more stable their inner life and personality, the more honestly they can thrive within this genuine unspoken agreement. When there is too little of this kind of consistency, they will continually wrong others, either by creating chaos in their inner life or by leaving themselves no choice but to close off their own soul from the rest of the world. This kind of consistency is at the core of Gabriel Marcel's investigation of fidelité, loyalty. This past month, when I started really applying myself to understanding Marcel, I discovered that in my own life I had matured enough to have a better grasp of the overall spirit of his work, and that I identified with the entire range of his concerns. I'm delighted. It's like finding a best friend. Part of the reason I want to study violin is that I'm moved by him and want to be a kind of disciple. Who knows if I'll ever have the chance to tell you more about his philosophy and art? Who knows if you would even enjoy it and find it moving. I may not be able to interpret your life for you, to speak for you, or make choices for you. But starting with my first letter to you, I have offered you a vivid internal blueprint, an illumination of the coordinates of your inner life, haven't I? Your inner life and mine are symbiotic. Unless you want to shut it down completely, to castrate it, your inner life will never be complete with anyone but me. Always it will remain thirsting to communicate with me, as long as I'm still alive. It will thirst to hear the sound of my voice and thirst to hear the music emanating from the wellspring of my spirit. You could, of course, just suppress this thirst, this desire, become insensate. Yet once it has swelled inside you, you've already had a taste of it. The existence of this spirit is a fact. Your spirit and my spirit are made from the same material, one tuned to the other. Eventually you'll realize that this part of you is the fruit of your careful irrigation and cultivation. It is a blessing. Through our violent outbursts, we have ultimately blocked, run aground, and sealed off our spirits from each other. In this world, there's no bond of love formidable enough, not even the enduring permanent bond between life and body, or anything else, is formidable enough. Instead, the most formidable and indestructible bond of all is that mutual belongingness of souls that share an originary home or womb. This bond will always be vital, so humans are condemned to suffer the pain of failing to transcend it, even as we are compelled to break and deny such a bond. It's precisely because I've realized this that I can express a simple conclusion in a time of chaos. Let us have no rupture between us. I've also gradually come to see more clearly what actually happened this past year. My violent outbursts and your shutting down, what my issues were, what yours were. I no longer have to depend on you for information because I found my way through the labyrinth and have left the jungle behind. None of this chaos has been caused by other people or your desire for them. All that doesn't matter. What matters is that an obstruction has blocked our spiritual communication. An emotional disconnect has grown between us, but the significance of your betrayal has already been carved in stone. In the future, when the time of reckoning arrives, you will pay by losing me, by having lost, whether in whole or in part, my most beautiful, most precious fidelity to you. This is something no one else will ever be able to give you in full. Loyalty is not a passive, negative guardianship of the gate. Loyalty arises from the complete and utter opening and subsequent blazing forth of one's inner life. It is an active, determined desire that demands total self-awareness and deliberate engagement. And I don't agree with your tangential use of the secular and the non-secular to describe our differences to explain the rupture between us. I wholly disagree. Secular life assumes a kind of passive, moralistic loyalty. It's the kind of life my parents and yours have been leading as they do their best to conform to the standards of such life. Apart from relating to the outside world as a couple, however, you could say that their shared inner life is minimal and shallow. This isn't to say they have no spiritual needs at all, or that their passions never cause them suffering, but they focus instead on the external world or find other outlets for their passions. The secular life they live demands they compartmentalize the very structure of their lives. This is their right, but they have no choice and no imagination. So if you say I'm a non-secular person, then I agree. The loyalty of a so-called secular life means nothing to me. I have no desire to have a barren life in soul. If you say that you, on the other hand, are precisely this kind of person, and that you are well suited to such a life, fine. I won't suffer then. If you are such a person or you want to become one, then I won't be bound to you because I couldn't possibly need or want someone like you. My relationship with Xuan Xuan was an example of this kind of disjunction, and I ended up hurting her. Although I could depend on her completely day to day and received from her as much love as I could ever ask, what I didn't understand was that my soul could never really need or long for her. I tried to be responsible, to care for her and cherish her. I earned a living, shared my livelihood, listened to her, protected her. What she and I achieved was precisely the ethical fulfillment of the loyalty component of a secular life. Only later did I realize that wasn't what she wanted for me. She yearned for me, but I was completely dispassionate as I hadn't given her my whole soul. Crueler still, she watched helplessly as I offered my soul to you, and I burst into a brilliant flame. She watched and she understood. She experienced the difference between 0 degrees and 100, and this was so painful that it nearly destroyed her. This is the wrong I committed against her. It's a story about Xuan Xuan in which you were also implicated, a story of my failing to live a secular life. Don't say that I do not understand, that I am incapable of living a secular life, or that I don't belong in a secular world. I've discovered that I actually may be able to simultaneously live 2 kinds of lives. The strength needed to lead a secular life is stored inside my body. You could even say it's hidden deep within the seed of my desire for love. It grows in the opposite way of most people's experiences, because first a deep spirituality developed in my life, and only later a desire and capacity for the real world. The seed of my desire for love could never fully mature. Instead, it drained all my energy reserves with tragic consequences. During those 6 months when you came to France, I had a chance to make that seed bloom and bear fruit, and my secular life might have thrived. But instead, I was drawn into a period of incredible turmoil and self-destruction because you totally shut down and didn't reciprocate my love. After the pain of your betrayal, I went to Tokyo to visit Yang. For a month, my body and mind were on the verge of total collapse, and Yang was the one who took me in and cared for me. For the first time, she opened up to me, lightening the load of my longing and anguish, and offered the passion and connection that I desired so desperately. Only then did I suddenly see what had actually happened this past year. The story of Yang and me is too long and too dense to be summarized in just a few lines. In fact, she admitted a deep love for me, although her love wasn't absolute. Somehow it caused that seed within to bloom and bear fruit. 3 years of maturing had made her realize that she loved me and that she was ready to admit her desire. It would not be for me to call this a kind of redemption. She knew what she wanted from love, and she accepted and paid the price for her comprehension with her whole self. So there was no need for me to possess her completely, even as she loved me deeply. And my life quickly recovered from a malaise so profound I was almost blind with it. My potential to live a secular life began to bloom and bear fruit. Because of her, I wanted to recover. I wanted to become a healthy, whole person again. Moved by her love, I wanted to mature into someone strong enough to be accountable for her, particularly for the secular aspects of her life. Because she had loved the wrong person for a very long time, part of her soul had suffered and shut down. She had sworn an oath to that person like the oath I swore to you. You, though, haven't yet entered the phase of life where oaths are sworn. Once I am completely liberated from the burden of my responsibility for you. When? Maybe the day when you become completely irrelevant to me. How sad to even mention it. I now believe that Young is the final one, the one I will spend my life waiting for. She is already a fixture in my life story and genuinely needs me. Her need highly exclusive and selective. Only I and no one else can occupy that position. If I can't have you, ultimately, I will love her and our future family. Moreover, I am prepared to do whatever is necessary and care for her, since in the end I am the only one who can shoulder the burden of her broken life. More important, she and I have already forgiven each other. Our feelings for each other have already passed beyond desire and possession, emancipating me from desire. What I mean is that she is the first person with whom I've experienced creative loyalty. Before we parted, she told me to find an outlet for my passion at all costs. I replied that I would survive for her and mature into a whole and healthy human being who would be able to take care of her. As for you, Shu, like I told Qingjin, my misfortune is that I have devoted myself completely to someone who can't accept my perfect love. There are still so many long reflections and experiences that I want to write to you about, but after writing for 7 or 8 straight hours, I'm empty and exhausted. Shu, can I point out a few things to you with these last words, though they may not be true? 1. On betrayal. Your betrayal of my life, my will, my body, tortured me this past month, leaving a wake of hate and trauma, and I've paid dearly. This was the most painful betrayal you could inflict, but I didn't die. I survived and will continue to heal. Your spirit, however, could never betray me, because your spirit will always yearn for me and belong to me. From your perspective, total betrayal can't hurt you. On the one hand, you never really cared about me or any of this. You never really cared enough, nor have you really grasped how the monopoly of desire works. Yet you would still suffer and my soul betrayed you. If my soul betrayed you, you would never be able to watch dispassionately if I gave my soul completely to someone else and my tenderness toward you disappeared. If that day ever comes, you'll pay a painful price. My soul is slipping away from you, even as I try to cling to it. 2. On passion and sex. Shu, it's not that you don't desire me, it's that your body has not yet grown into its desire. Your corporeal desire still can't merge with your spiritual desire. They're incoherent to each other. They can't cooperate. It's not that you've stopped desiring, but that your desire has not yet reached maturity. It's easy for the body to be open to desiring different people because desire wells up and demands to be satisfied. It's easy to categorize corporeal desire as sexuality, but if it has no means of merging with spiritual desire, then a rupture will occur between spirit and flesh. For ultimately, passion and sex are only expressed physically, but through a true union between two spirits. When the spirit can truly love and find contentment, both the body and other key aspects of life will fall naturally into place, working in unison, merging. Shu, one day, when your corporeal desire has matured, when you're able to desire any body, then you will desire me. If at that time there isn't any rupture between us, our lives are harmonious, our spirits remain in love, and our bodies can still satisfy each other. And you will discover that I'm the one you desire most profoundly of all, because your spirit loves me most profoundly of all. I'm working hard this time so that nothing can undermine the loving communion of our spirits. 3. on my outbursts and your shutting down. Shu, you never really stopped loving me. You can never really not love me. But during this long, long year, you sometimes acted as if you didn't love me. You've done countless things that suggest this, but I never really severed ties with you completely because I could still sense your love for me, sense your thirst for my spirit, even though this love only manifests itself in the weakest and most distorted of ways. This all happened because I started to blame you when I moved to Paris. How pitiful that a pair of lovers so completely enamored of each other chose to take such a journey. I needed you, but couldn't be satisfied. The suppressed and dependent sides of your personality, along with your failure to understand my passion and your failure to deal with the pain caused by this passion, all these things led me to blame you. I felt so unfulfilled last March and April that my ubiquitous blaming tantrums caused you to start shutting me out. Pitiful. After that, the situation went from bad to worse. As I sunk into a pathological state of outburst, and you sunk into a long-term shutdown. On the very same day you started shutting me out, your inner self started to become unhinged, lost. This caused yet deeper frustration and dissatisfaction. In the end, you completely failed to express your love for me. Quite the opposite. You kept wanting me, but repeatedly said you didn't love me, while I frantically continued to blame you and became trapped in a state of hysteria. We made each other this way. My worst mistake was my blaming heart. That was the first of many mistakes. From the very beginning, the one you place your trust in, open yourself up to, and devote your passion and essentially your life to should be the one who understands you and accepts you unconditionally, the one who will never blame you for your immaturity or your failure to satisfy your partner. Before coming to Paris, I was this person to you. Though you aren't mature enough yet to satisfy the needs of my spirit and desires, and could not fulfill the requirements of a union with me, you are still somehow thoroughly devoted to me. Before coming to Paris, I was moved by the depths of your devotion and grew used to it. During that phase, we were cooperating and communicating in perfect harmony with each other. Everything seemed fine until daily life in Paris gradually started to sicken me with despair, a despair that you couldn't understand, and so we stopped communicating. I blamed you even more, while your own secret self-loathing grew. All this blame frustrated you more and more and more until finally you simply shut me out. I lost your trust, your openness, your love, your devotion. But the most tragic thing is that my pathologically violent outbursts crushed your inner confidence and composure. Now you can't even act with the slightest bit of honesty, trust, courage, or integrity toward me. Now you are someone who isn't really you. Honestly, Shu is another person. The Shu I knew, whom I believed in, and whom I love passionately, and to whom I prostrate myself in worship, is the total opposite of this one. She hasn't degenerated and disappeared. She's just hiding from me. This month, my tragedy reached a peak with a total spiritual breakdown caused by my loss of faith in this deity. Shu, it's not that you no longer love Zoe or need Zoe anymore. It's precisely because you tried so hard to satisfy him without success that you felt defeated and frustrated. At first, when you were completely open with him and madly in love, you did your best. Later on, when you were shut down and couldn't love him anymore, you still tried to satisfy him, but you were too exhausted, too frustrated, so you chose to abandon him. But even this proved impossible, as after you had accepted his love, you never really stopped loving him, stopped feeling bound to his spirit. You can never erase the enormous space he occupied in your life, nor extricate your fate from his. You can never stop trying so hard to satisfy him, to grow closer to him. So what I must insist on telling you here is this. What you stumble over, what wounds the essence of your desire, is not loving. Shu, your first love, cannot be compared to any other. You cannot erase all traces of it, because your body and soul have been so deeply desired by me, so fiercely loved by me. How indelibly I inscribed your body and soul with the first perfect traces of a beginning. Those were the first indelible traces of a desire in your life. As your lover, I have given myself to you so completely. I belong to you so truly. Can you really disavow the mark that symbolizes our desire's consummation? Can you? Not unless you've shut your spirit down completely, as you've tried so hard to do recently. To untie the bell, you have to find the person who tied it. Your spirit can't be released from its confinement unless it's released by me. If you never communicate with my spirit again, if your life is never open to mine again, you'll never leave the desert. No other can provide an exit. You will even lose contact with your own soul, turn into someone I hate and could never want, and I, like a kite with a broken string, will float away, never to return. I want so much for you to talk to me again, to trust me and be open as you once were. I want to free you from your state of shutdown. To do so, I must stop my pleading and stop blaming you. I must enable you to recapture your original memory of Zoe's unconditional love for you. This is the unconscious need that's central to your life and calls forth my desire. It's all I can do. I'm trying to grow a little, though not too much. While keeping in mind my earlier ideals, I'm trying my best, trying to see how far I can get. For this homecoming, I could never ask you to make the first move, as it's up to me to return to a place of loving you before I can expect you to quietly do the same. If I fail, then we surely lose each other, down to the final eyelash. I'm waging a life and death battle with my own destiny. I can only pray that you'll help me, that you'll never push me away with words, or at least a lot less, and actions that harm my desire for you, that you won't push me off this cliff, not thoughtlessly sever the cord between us that I want to strengthen because I love you. I am not in turmoil anymore. The conflict within me is no longer serious. If you try to reconcile my words and my behavior, you'll find that they are not as contradictory as you might believe. I'm aware of what each person I know means to me. I've always been clear about what I want, and I still have the power and freedom to choose whom to devote myself and my soul to, and hopefully always will. I know I'm complicated, but I'm also lucid. I feel things deeply, but my desire is like a pure crystal. This is the rarest, most beautiful part of me that sparkles brightly in the crowd.